morning and welcome everyone. Our lodge meets every Sunday at 11 a.m. for the introduction and discussion and questions and answers on a particular topic which is presented by a student of the philosophy. And on the first and third Sundays of the month we gather after the meeting for the afternoon meeting, which is at this time the discussion of the Bhagavad Gita as a round table. On Sundays all over the world the students of Theosophy meet, and this gives a tremendous impetus to the energetic creative power of the universe to disseminate this philosophy not just through the students but through the recording of it, as HBB says, on the Akashic light, which then affects all of humanity at the same time. Also, the work of the masters is continuous. It never disappears from the world, even if we don't know about it. And they continue with this effort throughout the ages in order that humanity be able to move forward in the evolutionary process. The declaration. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy and the exemplification in practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. The following is the form signed by associates of the United Lodge of Theosophists. Being in sympathy with the purposes of this lodge, as set forth in its declaration, I hereby record my desire to be enrolled as an associate, it being understood that such association calls for no obligation on my part other than that which I myself determine. Today's reading comes from the Bhagavad Gita. Know that Prakriti, or nature, and Purusha, the spirit, are without beginning, and know that the passions and the three qualities are sprung from nature. Nature, or Prakriti, is said to be that which operates in producing cause and effect in actions. Individual spirit, or Purusha, is said to be the cause of experiencing pain and pleasure. For a spirit, when invested with matter, or Prakriti, experienceth the qualities which proceed from Prakriti. Its connection with these qualities is the cause of its rebirth in good and evil wombs. The spirit in the body is called Maheshwara, the great Lord, the spectator, the admonisher, the sustainer, the enjoyer, and also the Paramatma, the highest soul. He who thus knoweth the spirit and nature, together with the qualities, whatever mode of life he may lead, is not born again on this earth. Some men, by meditation, using contemplation upon the self, behold the spirit within. Others attain to that end by philosophical study with its realization, and others by means of religional works. Others again, who are not acquainted with it in this manner, but have heard it from others, cleave unto and respect it, and even these, if assiduous only upon tradition and attentive to hearing the scriptures, pass beyond the gulf of death. Know, O chief of Bharatas, that whenever anything, whether animate or inanimate, is produced, it is due to the union of Kshetra and Kshetrajna, body and the soul. He who seeth the Supreme Being existing alike, imperishable in all perishable things, sees indeed. Perceiving the same Lord present in everything and everywhere, he does not by the lower self destroy his own soul, but goeth to the supreme end. He who seeth that all his actions are performed by nature only, and that the self within is not the actor, sees indeed. And when he realizes perfectly that all things whatsoever in nature are comprehended in the one, he attains to the Supreme Spirit. This Supreme Spirit of son of Kunti, even when it is in the body, neither acteth, nor is it affected by action, because, being without beginning and devoid of attribute, it is changeless. As the all-moving Akasha, by reason of its subtlety, passeth everywhere unaffected, so the spirit, though present in every kind of body, is not attached to action, nor affected. As a single sun illuminateth the whole world, even so doth the one spirit illumine every body, O son of Bharata. Those who, with the eye of wisdom, thus perceive what is the difference between the body and the spirit, and the destruction of the illusion of objects, go to the Supreme. And today's talk, reincarnation.
Good morning. Perhaps we can start by asking, is it enough for man to know that he exists? Is it enough to be formed a human being to enable him to deserve the appellation of man? In order to become a genuine spiritual entity, which that designation implies, man must first create himself anew, so to speak. In other words, thoroughly eliminate from his mind and spirit not only the dominating influence of selfishness and other impurities, but also the infection of superstition and prejudice. As the watch passes from hand to hand and room to room in a factory, one part being added here and another there, until the delicate machine is perfected, according to the design conceived in the mind of the master before the work was begun. So, according to ancient philosophy, the first divine conception of man takes shape little by little in the several departments of the universal workshop, and the perfect human being finally appears on our scene. This philosophy teaches that nature never leaves her work unfinished. If baffled at the first attempt, she tries again. When she evolves a human embryo, the intention is that a man shall be perfected, physically, intellectually, and spiritually. His body is to grow mature, wear out, and die. His mind unfold, ripen, and be harmoniously balanced. His divine spirit illuminate and blend easily with the inner man. No human being completes its grand cycle, or the circle of necessity, until all these are accomplished. As the laggards in a race struggle and plod in their first quarter, while the victor darts past the goal, so in the race of immortality, some souls outspeed all the rest and reach the end, while their myriad competitors are toiling under the load of matter, close to the starting point. Some unfortunates fall out entirely and lose all chance of the prize. Some retrace their steps and begin again. This is what the Hindu dreads above all things, transmigration and reincarnation, only on other and inferior planets, never on this one. But there's a way to avoid it, and Buddha taught this in his doctrine of poverty, restriction of the senses, perfect indifference to the objects of this earthly vale of tears, freedom from passion, and frequent intercommunication with the Atma, soul contemplation. The cause of reincarnation is ignorance of our senses, and the idea that there's any reality in the world, anything except abstract existence. From the organs of sense comes the hallucination we call contact. From contact, desire. From desire, sensation, which also is a deception of our body. From sensation, the cleaving to existing bodies. From this cleaving, reproduction. And from reproduction, disease, decay, and death. Thus, like the revolutions of a wheel, there is a regular succession of death and birth, the moral cause of which is the cleaving to existing objects, while the instrumental cause is karma, the power which controls the universe, prompting it to activity, merit and demerit. It is therefore the great desire of all beings who would be released from the sorrows of successive birth to seek the destruction of the moral cause, the cleaving to existing objects, or evil desire. They in whom evil desire is entirely destroyed are called arhats. Freedom from evil desire ensures the possession of a miraculous power. At his death, the arhat is never reincarnated. He invariably attains nirvana. Nirvana is the world of cause, in which all deceptive effects or delusions of our senses disappear. Nirvana is the highest attainable sphere. The reincarnationists and believers in karma alone dimly perceive that the whole secret of life is in the unbroken series of its manifestations, whether in or apart from the physical body. Intimately, or rather indissolubly connected with karma is the law of rebirth, or of the reincarnation of the same spiritual individuality in a long, almost interminable series of personalities. The latter, personalities, are like the various costumes and characters played by the same actor, with each of which that actor identifies himself and is identified by the public for the space of a few hours. The inner or real man who personates those characters knows the whole time that he's Hamlet for the brief space of a few acts, which represents, however, on the plane of human illusion, the whole life of Hamlet. And he knows that he was, the night before, King Lear, the transformation in his turn of the Othello of a still earlier preceding night. But the outer, visible character is supposed to be ignorant of the fact. In actual life, that ignorance is, unfortunately, but too real. Nevertheless, the permanent individuality is fully aware of the fact, though, through the atrophy of the spiritual eye in the physical body, that knowledge is unable to impress itself on the consciousness of the false personality. That which is part of our souls is eternal, says Thackeray. And what can be nearer to our souls than that which happens at the dawns of our lives? Those lives are countless, but the soul or spirit that animates us throughout these myriads of existences is the same. And though the book and volume of the physical brain may forget events within the scope of one terrestrial life, the bulk of collected recollections can never desert the divine soul within us. Its whispers may be too soft, the sound of its words too far off the plane perceived by our physical senses. Yet the shadow of events that were, just as much as the shadow of the events that are to come, is within its perceptive powers, and is ever present before its mind's eye. Mystics and occultists down the ages have uniformly asserted the truth of reincarnation. The main and central idea is that the human soul is immortal and unfolding. Its growth takes place in the soil of the body and its sensorium. The nature as the genesis of the soul need not remain matters of conjecture or speculation. There is knowledge. The law of cycles, by which the processes of nature take place, compels a logical mind to arrive at the conclusion that reincarnation represents the cycle of human evolution. Man is born and dies as the universe is making the vast cycles of the days and nights of Brahma. Voltaire saw this when he said that it is not more surprising to be born twice than once. Everything in nature is resurrection. One argument against a serious consideration of reincarnation is its supposed impracticability. It is taken to be a teaching that stresses otherworldliness. This is a hasty deduction. It has been recommended that reincarnation may be taken as a working hypothesis, not only for the purposes of solving our personal problems, but also national and social ones. Men of modern knowledge accept numerous aspects of reincarnation. Recurrence and resurrection create the spiral of progress everywhere. Death and regeneration are to be seen everywhere. Why should it be otherwise with man's body, which dies, but which must refashion itself with the will to live, which every human soul possesses, and holds to with a superb tenacity? This is the most ancient of doctrines, and is believed in now by more human minds than the number of those who do not hold it. The millions in the East almost all accept it. It was taught by the Greeks. A large number of the Chinese now believe it, as their forefathers did before them. The Jews thought it was true, and it has not disappeared from their religion. And Jesus, who is called the founder of Christianity, also believed and taught it. But who or what is it that reincarnates? It is not the body, for that dies and disintegrates. And but few of us would like to be chained forever to such bodies as we now have, admitted to be infected with disease, except in the case of the savage. It is not the astral body, for that it also has its term and must go to pieces after the physical has gone. Nor is it the passions and desires. They, to be sure, have a very long term, because they have the power to reproduce themselves in each life, so long as we do not eradicate them. And reincarnation provides for that, since we are given by it many opportunities, slowly, one by one, killing off the desires and passions which mar the heavenly picture of the spiritual man. The passional part of us coalesces with the astral after death, and makes a seeming being that has a short life to live while it is disintegrating. When the separation is complete between the body that has died, the astral body, and the passions and desires, life having begun to busy itself with other forms, the higher triad, Atma, spirit, Buddhi, its vehicle or spiritual soul, and Manas, the mind principle, who are the real man, immediately go into another state. And when that state, which is called Devachan, or heaven, is over, they are attracted back to earth for reincarnation. They are the immortal part of us. They, in fact, and no other are we. This should be firmly grasped by the mind, for upon its clear understanding depends the comprehension of the entire doctrine. What stands in the way of the modern Western man seeing this clearly is the long training we have all had in materialistic science and materializing religion, both of which have made the mere physical body too prominent. The one has taught of matter alone, and the other has preached the resurrection of the body, a doctrine against common sense, fact, logic, and testimony. But there is no doubt that the theory of the bodily resurrection has arisen from the corruption of the older and true teaching. Resurrection is founded on what Job says about seeing his Redeemer in his flesh, and on St. Paul's remark that the body was raised incorruptible. But Job was an Egyptian who spoke of seeing his teacher or initiator, who was the Redeemer, and Jesus and Paul referred to the spiritual body only. Although reincarnation is the law of nature, the complete trinity of Atma, Buddhi, Manas does not yet fully incarnate in this race. They use and occupy the body by means of the entrance of Manas, the lowest of the three, and the other two shine upon it from above, constituting the God in heaven. This was symbolized in the older Jewish teaching about the heavenly man, who stands with his head in heaven and his feet in hell. That is, the head, Atma and Buddhi, are yet in heaven, and the feet, Manas, walk in hell, which is the body and physical life. For that reason, man is not yet fully conscious, and reincarnations are needed to at last complete the incarnation of the whole Trinity in the body. When that has been accomplished, the race will have become as gods, and the godlike Trinity being in full possession, the entire mass of matter will be perfected and raised up for the next step. This is the real meaning of the Word made flesh. It was so grand a thing in the case of any single person, such as Jesus or Buddha, as to be looked upon as a divine incarnation. And out of this too comes the idea of the crucifixion, for Manas is thus crucified for the purpose of raising up the thief to paradise. This coming into life over and over again cannot be avoided by the ordinary man, because lower Manas is still bound by desire, which is the preponderating principle at the present period. Being so influenced by desire, Manas is continually deluded while in the body, and being thus deluded is unable to prevent the action upon it of the forces set up in the lifetime. These forces are again generated by manas, that is by the thinking of the lifetime. Each thought makes a physical as well as mental link with the desire in which it is rooted. All life is filled with such thoughts, and when the period of rest after death is ended, manas is bound by innumerable electrical magnetic threads to earth by reason of the thoughts of the last life, and therefore by desire. For it was desire that caused so many thoughts and ignorance of the true nature of things. An understanding of this doctrine of man being really a thinker and made of thought will make clear all the rest in relation to incarnation and reincarnation. The body of the inner man is made of thought, and this being so, it must follow that if the thoughts have more affinity for earth life than for life elsewhere, a return to life here is inevitable. The four lower constituents of man, that is, the passions and desires, the life principle, astral body, and physical body, or in other words, passions and desires are called kama. The life principle is also called prana, astral body, linga sharira, and physical body, stula sharira. These are transitory and subject to disintegration in themselves, as well as to separation from each other. When the hour arrives for their separation to begin, the combination can no longer be kept up. The physical body dies, the atoms of which each of the four is composed begin to separate from each other, and the whole collection, being disjointed, is no longer fit for one as an instrument for the real man. This is what is called death among us mortals. But it is not death for the real man, because he is deathless, persistent, immortal. He is therefore called the triad, or indestructible trinity, while the lower constituents are known as the quaternary or mortal four. Another name is triad, mortal four. So let us restate before going into details. The real man is the trinity of Atma, Buddhi, Manas, or spirit and mind. And he uses certain agents and instruments to get in touch with nature in order to know himself. These instruments and agents are found in the lower four. Each principle in which category is of itself an instrument for the particular experience belonging to its own field, the body being the lowest, least important, and most transitory of the whole series. For when we arrive at the body on the way down from the higher mind, it can be shown that all of its organs are in themselves senseless and useless when deprived of the man within. Sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smelling do not pertain to the body, but to the second, unseen physical man. The real organs for the exercise of those powers being in the astral body, and those in the physical body being but the mechanical outer instruments for making the coordination between nature and the real organs inside. Having thus gone over the field and shown what are the lower principles, We find Theosophy teaching that at the present point of man's evolution, he's a fully developed quaternary, with the higher principles partly developed. It is because the Trinity is not yet incarnate in the race that life has so many mysteries, some of which are showing themselves from day to day in all the various experiments made on and in man. The physician knows not what life is, nor why the body moves as it does, because the spiritual portion is yet enshrouded in the clouds of heaven. The scientist is wandering in the dark, confounded and confused by all that hypnotism and other strange things bring before him. Because the conscious man is out of sight on the very top of the divine mountain, thus compelling the learned to speak of the subconscious mind, the latent personality, and the like. And the priest can give us no light at all because he denies man's godlike nature, reduces all to the level of original sin, and puts upon our conception of God the black mark of inability to control or manage the creation, without invention of expedients to cure supposed errors. But this old truth solves the riddle and paints God and nature in harmonious colors. Reincarnation does not mean that we go into animal forms after death, as is believed by some Eastern peoples. Once a man, always a man, is the saying in the Great Lodge. But it would not be too much punishment for some men were it possible to condemn them to rebirth in brute bodies. However, nature does not go by sentiment, but by law. And we, not being able to see all, cannot say that the brutal man is brute all through his nature. And evolution, having brought Manas, the thinker and immortal person, onto this plane, cannot send him back to the brute which has not Manas. The moment we postulate a double evolution, physical and spiritual, we have at the same time to admit that it can only be carried on by reincarnation. This is in fact demonstrated by science. It is shown that the matter of the earth and of all things physical upon it was at one time either gaseous or molten, that it cooled, that it altered, that from its alterations and evolutions at last were produced all the great variety of things and beings. This on the physical plane is transformation or change from one form to another. The total mass of matter is about the same as in the beginning of this globe, with a very minute allowance for some stardust. Hence it must have been changed over and over again, and thus been physically reformed and re-embodied. Of course, to be strictly accurate, we cannot use the word reincarnation, because incarnate refers to flesh. We may say re-embodied, and then we see that both for matter and for man, there has been a constant change of form, and this is broadly speaking reincarnation. As to the whole mass of matter, the doctrine is that it will be all raised to man's estate when man has gone further on himself. There is no residuum left after man's final salvation, which in a mysterious way is to be disposed of or done away with in some remote dust heap of nature. The true doctrine allows for nothing like that, and at the same time is not afraid to give the true disposition of what would seem to be a residuum. It is all worked up into other states, for as this philosophy declares, there is no inorganic matter, whatever but that every atom is alive and has the germ of self-consciousness. It must follow that one day it will all have been changed. Thus, what is now called human flesh is so much matter that one day was wholly mineral, later on vegetable, and now refined into human atoms. At a point of time very far from now, the present vegetable matter will have been raised to the animal stage, and what we now use as our organic or fleshy matter will have changed by transformation through evolution into self-conscious thinkers, and so on up the whole scale until the time shall come when what is now known as mineral matter will have passed on to the human stage and out into that of thinker. Then at the coming on of another great period of evolution, the mineral matter of that time will which is now passing through its lower transformations on other planets and in other systems of worlds. This is perhaps a fanciful scheme for the people of the present day, who are so accustomed to being called bad, sinful, weak, and utterly foolish from their birth that they fear to believe the truth about themselves. But for the disciples of the ancient Theosophists, it is not impossible or fanciful, but is logical and vast. And no doubt it will one day be admitted by everyone when the mind of the Western race has broken away from Mosaic chronology and Mosaic ideas of man and nature. Therefore, as to reincarnation, we say that they are first to be applied to the whole cosmos, not alone to man. The idea that things can cease to exist and still be is a fundamental one in Eastern psychology. Under this apparent contradiction in terms, there rests a fact of nature to realize which in the mind, rather than to argue about words, is the important thing. A familiar instance of a similar paradox is offered by chemical combination. The question whether hydrogen and oxygen cease to exist when they combine to form water is still a moot one, some arguing that since they are found again when the water is decomposed, they must be there all the while. Others contending that as they actually turn into something totally different, they must cease to exist as themselves for the time being. But neither side is able to form the faintest conception of the real condition of a thing, which has become something else, and yet has not ceased to be itself. Existence as water may be said to be for oxygen and hydrogen a state of non-being, which is more real being than their existence as gases. And it may faintly symbolize the condition of the universe when it goes to sleep, or ceases to be during the nights of Brahma, to awaken or reappear again when the dawn of the new Manvantara recalls it to what we call existence. We may now revisit the question again. What is the universe for? And for what final purpose is man, the immortal thinker, here in evolution? It is all for the experience and emancipation of the soul, for the purpose of raising the entire mass of manifested matter up to the stature, nature, and dignity of conscious godhood. As we have all alluded to at the beginning, the great aim is to reach self-consciousness, not through a race or a tribe of some favored nation, but by and through the perfecting after transformation of the whole mass of matter, as well as what we now call soul. Nothing is or is to be left out. The aim for present man is his initiation into complete knowledge, and for the other kingdoms below him, that they may be raised up gradually from stage to stage to be in time initiated also. This is evolution carried to its highest power. It is a magnificent prospect. It makes of man a god, and gives to every part of nature the possibility of being one day the same. There is strength and nobility in it, for by this no man is dwarfed and belittled, for no one is so originally sinful that he cannot rise above all sin. Treated from the materialistic position of science, evolution takes in but half of life, while the religious conception of it is a mixture of nonsense and fear. Present religions keep the element of fear and at the same time imagine then that an almighty being can think of no other earth but this and has to govern this one very imperfectly. But the old theosophical view makes the universe a vast, complete, and perfect whole. Successive lives on earth in human bodies for the unfolding mind-soul of man is a reasonable and satisfying doctrine. It solves problems and answers questions that no other doctrine does. It is logical, and our minds are satisfied if we examine its basis and principles. It not only engenders hope in the heart, but also brings it the contentment born of understanding and the dauntless energy to press forward on the road to self-improvement leading to self-realization. Some might wonder why HPB and others well known in the Theosophical movement lay so much stress on doctrines like karma and reincarnation. It is not alone because these doctrines are easily apprehended and beneficent to individuals, not only because they furnish, as they necessarily do, a solid foundation for ethics or all human conduct, but because they are the very keynotes of the higher evolution of man. Without karma and reincarnation, evolution is but a fragment, a process whose beginnings are unknown and whose outcome cannot be discerned. A glimpse of what might be, a hope of what should be. But in the light of karma and reincarnation, evolution becomes the logic of what must be. The links in the chain of being are filled in, and the circles of reason and of life are complete. Karma gives the eternal law of action, and reincarnation furnishes the boundless field for its display. Thousands of persons can understand these two principles, apply them as a basis of conduct, and weave them into the fabric of their lives, who may not be able to grasp the complete synthesis of that endless evolution of which these doctrines form so important a part. Knowing something as to our essential nature, knowing something of the purpose of life, and that life is all made up of learning, knowing that the universe is all alive, and that there is in reality no injustice, save that which we inflict upon ourselves by reaction, we would take an entirely different view of life and put these ideas into daily practice. We would take the position which most of us all need to take, that of our own responsibility, which religions have taught us to shift onto some god or devil. Recognizing that each one of us is from the same source and going towards the same goal, though the path will vary with the pilgrim, we will act toward each one as if he were a part of ourselves. Like us, each one is moving onward, perhaps below us, possibly above. From the one above, we can obtain help. To the one below, we can give help. Such is the interdependence which should exist between all conscious beings. And under such a conception, our civilization would not be as it is now. We should not find every man's hand raised against every other man. We should not see those in poor case finding fault with the wrong conditions, but finding fault rather with their own wrong relations to others at some time, when they abused the power that they had. We should see each one trying to discipline himself, trying to bring himself into proper relation with all the rest, not so much outwardly, perhaps, as inwardly. For we may be sure that if we make clean the inside of the bowl, the outside will take care of itself. We have no greater duty to perform than to make clear and clean our natures, to make them true, to make them in accord with the great object of life, the evolution of the soul. That's the end of the prepared remarks. The floor is now open for questions. Please.
What brings a person back to a physical existence? Or the triad, I mean.
To gain further experience, to align so we talked about the mind principle to align the thoughts with more spiritual aspects and to get rid of the desires and passions that are related to earth, to material existence. And we mentioned sin, devil. Those are terms that are related to selfishness and material existence. So it's slightly different than religions use it.
And is reincarnation related also to the law of karma?
It is, yes, yes. Karma is, as we said, reaction. Karma rules anything that's in manifestation. So a part of that is as you have to act and react, it's between you and the universe. It goes back and forth, and reincarnation is the scene for it to play out, basically. Any other thoughts, please?
So this is students' understanding. There is a statement by HPB where she says that whatever the individual, the personality in incarnation makes perfect is assimilated into the triad. She calls it Sutratman, the silver thread. So whatever it is that we have not been able to perfect because we did not have enough time to work on it, we have to come back and face it. And I think those are called the skandhas. You might want to read the definition from the book. So if we have the skandhas left over from this particular life, we go to the rest period. But as soon as the rest period is over, that electromagnetic attraction of the skandhas will pull it to ourselves again in the next incarnation. So the soul has a purpose in coming into incarnation, and it knows what it is, but the personality, once we are incorporated into the physical body, does not remember. And that conflict is continuously going on. Whether we know it or not, that little voice in our head says, hey, don't do that. That's our inner life telling us that's not the right way to go, but nevertheless the personality goes ahead and does it. Whereas if we were to listen to it, our life would be a lot smoother. So from another perspective, it's like looking at it as harmonizing what we had disharmonized. And whatever cost that was incurred, we have to come and expend it. Cost being pain and suffering.
Right, and you said it goes into heaven, and as we talked, it's the Devachan, and it's the higher triad that goes there.
Yeah.
The lower four stays here. I guess it disintegrates along the way as the higher triad goes into quote unquote heaven, Devachan.
But as you explained, the astral body is tensile, has tremendous strength. So electromagnetism is in it. We're electromagnetic beings. That's why lightning can kill us. So the skandhas are electromagnetic. They retain that attractiveness to that personality, whoever he was. So some of the same substance will go back into him.
Yes, and another example that this student likes is, so we talked about the 7 principles, and the lower 4 is, if we think of the waves in the ocean and the sun being the higher triad, the purpose is to calm the waters down below so that your divine self can shine better here in physical reality. So this student really likes that example as to what we should be doing here in terms of, we talk about passions, desires, how we should tame them so that the higher self can shine through. But we talked about skandhas. I'll read the description that H.P. Blavatsky wrote in the Theosophical Glossary. She says, it's bundles or groups of attributes, everything finite, inapplicable to the eternal and the absolute. There are 5, esoterically 7, attributes in every human living being. which are known as the Panchaskandhas. These are 1. Form, Rupa, 2. Perception, Vidana, 3. Consciousness, Sanjna, 4 is action, Sanskara, 5 is knowledge, Vijnana. These unite at the birth of man and constitute his personality. After the maturity of these skandhas, they begin to separate and weaken, and this is followed by Jara Marana, or decrepitude and death. So another comment that we should be making here is the fact that we use a lot of Sanskrit terms, and H.P. Blavatsky says that these are essential for us to use because English does not have the proper ways to describe these very spiritual terms. So it's on us to study and really understand what they truly mean. Please.
But she also says that Sanskrit was the root of all of the language in the universe today,
Right.
but eventually that is where we're going, that our universal language will be Sanskrit again, because the terminology and our spiritual advancement has to go together.
Right.
There is no other terminology in any language that can
Very
express
true.
those thoughts.
Yes. Please.
Is it also fair to say that nothing ever disappears? When you're embodied, when you think about it as a life wave or something, maybe that's the way we want to think about our being, because we're embodied, we have this personality, and that's what people see. But intertwined in all that is this life wave I'm thinking in terms of. And
Well,
that's who we really are, and that's, you know, we let go of all that, and the four lords stay here and become whatever influence we've had over it. They become that.
we should be careful with using life because there's a principle that we talked about, life principle.
Right.
So we said the mortal four, life principle, astral body, physical body, and the desires and passions, those constitute the lower four. And they stay in this realm and they disintegrate, and because the higher, the will to live and the higher triad has completed its
Right.
its play in this scene.
But they disintegrated to stardust, if you will.
So we talked about skandhas and
nothing ever disappears. Is what
right,
my
yes,
question is.
it doesn't.
So
and
we influence whatever bits of stardust.
right, yes, and the student explained that there's electromagnetic threads that you have associated yourself with, and when your next reincarnation comes about, you're going to be attracting similar forces, energies, principles.
On the same comment as her, if we are using the skandhas in our new incarnation, and the skandhas were belong to the last reincarnation, how is it that we have a different personality?
Well,
At the
it's
beginning you said, okay, it's the same self, but every lifetime on earth, on the physical plane, is a different personality, but we're using the skandhas that we left from the last reincarnation.
yes. Well, life law, karma is the universal law. It dictates how the new scene, the new actor, how it's shaped. It could be man or woman. It's beyond obviously our understanding, but it's universal guidance as to what shape or form that you should be taking.
Can we say it's nature versus nurture in this new life time on Earth, or does it have something to do? Because this student understands that we choose where to come, to which family, because we're
yes.
aligned with their through karma.
Yes,
with
there are
certain
national
families,
karmas.
nations.
Yes. Yes, there's a great quote by H.P. Blavatsky that she says, if you love, for example, someone so intensely, next lifetime, you know, you establish very close bonds and then you can be connected with them. But nature versus nurture, it's both. For this student's understanding, it has to be you taking part in it, you dictating it, but of course, at the end of the day, within and without is the same. You know, at the end, you have that realization that me and you are not different, right? So how can you make that comparison? Or is it me or is it someone else? So, please.
To answer it completely is not really a very small explanation. However, we must not forget that the individuality that goes into Devachan or rest period, whatever the name, heaven, is growing in the sense that it is reliving in its imagination what it could not do on earth, what it could not achieve on earth. It's continuously doing the last incarnation, and it's improving on it so that in the next incarnation it might come back as a higher individuality with greater potential to express what it had learned and assimilate it through the last one.
The students' understanding was that Devachan, you don't do any actual work per se.
No, but you're assimilating what you have learned through that. HPB says that imaginary process is real to the individuality that is reliving the personal effects that that incarnation had provided. Not all of it, just the last one. And another part of it is that the mind is going to be different. You're going to obtain a different brain in your physical body. Yes, you get attract all of the skandhas back, but other people have used them in your 12 to 15 year rest period. So they have been affected as well. And depending on what you're going to express in that particular life, karma provides the environment. That's the nurturing part. But remembering that each human being is 7 principled, and the 7 also divides into another 7. So we have 49 fires in us, according to HPB. If you read the extract on 289 to 300, something like that, in Secret Doctrine, it explains it all. The fires, in other words. And remember, your expression is going to be divided into those 49 aspects of you. And depending what you have brought and what you have improved upon, you're going to express different things in your new incarnation.
Yes, and one thing that you said, probably you meant between lifetimes, some other person can use. You said something like that, and you mentioned 12 to 15 years. You meant 1200 to 1500.
Correct.
Just yeah.
Yes, because other people have similar natures to ourselves, and when they come in, our electromagnetic cells or atoms, whatever you want to call them, is available for use. They're not going to just sit there, right? So whatever you attract, others will attract similar things from us and use them, especially if we are a higher individuality. It is beneficent to the person who can use it. It uplifts it, not just the personality, but all of the substance, because human body, she tells us, is an alchemical process. It uplifts it because the thought process affects everything in the body.
Right.
So it is a very
hopeful
philosophy.
It gives us a lot of responsibility too. Please.
Yeah, just 2 questions. You use mind and brain almost simultaneously. Now, the brain and the mind are not necessarily the same thing, right?
No.
That's the brain is the vehicle of the mind. I didn't want to get into that too much, but just to throw that out.
Yes, they are different.
Which is it volume 1 or volume 2 you're quoting from, 289?
I think it's 1.
Okay, thanks.
It's an extract, she says, that had never been released before. She put it in there because it explains the evolutionary process from mineral up to the human mind, I think, and how it comes again. But I would like to make one comment. In this time, our civilization has perfected the kamic principles. HPB says what has happened to us is that we have become ingrained in it. that we were supposed to allow to go through it, that it is a necessary process we must go through, because without desire, no activity would follow. However, she says, this civilization has become enmeshed into substance to such a degree that substance now demands attention from us. And our society, when you look at all the ads on TV and elsewhere, is based on that same principle, suggestion.
Right.
She says that our civilization, especially the West, has been built upon suggestion, and it continues to do so because of that separative ideology, that we're all separate units. Not only that, that we're also separate from the other nations. There is no such law in the universe. We are one family, and we are all interrelated to one another. So if we understand that, you could never hurt another human soul, could you?
Absolutely.
I think it's very important that this philosophy be disseminated to the West, especially. Kali Yuga in India, as well as I think here. So we both can benefit from it. And she says that we also have to extend a hand to the East, because economically we're a higher civilization, but intellectually and spiritually they are higher.
Absolutely.
So if we can combine those qualities, she says, the next generation would benefit from it.
Thank you. Our time is up. See you next week.